Today I'm going to talk to you about using different pen and ink techniques to create value in your artwork. In this exercise, we're going to explore the pen and ink techniques of hatching, cross-hatching, stippling, and scumbling to create a value scale. The traditional value scale goes from 1 to 10, with white being at one end and black being at the other end, and 8 values of gray between. So we're just going to focus on those 8 values of gray between. What you can do to set up your paper is create 8 boxes for each of these techniques. There's 4 techniques. They don't have to be squares or rectangles. They could be circles, however you want to break that into 8 sections. The first technique that I'm going to do is hatching. Hatching is when artists use lines in one direction to create a value. The wider, further spaced apart the lines are, the lighter the value will appear, and the closer together the lines are, the darker the value will appear. So I'm going to start in the middle at 4, and I'm going to work lighter, and then I'm going to work darker. Things that you can do in hatching to make sure that you're going from a lighter to darker value is if you count how many lines you place in each block, you should be decreasing the amount of lines as the value gets darker and increasing the amount of lines as the value gets darker. So do make sure that you're keeping track of how many lines you're doing and that these lines are all going in the same direction. There is no crossing. In the next section, I'm going to be using the cross-hatching technique. So this is when the lines go in more than one direction, and you'll have more crossing and closer lines as the value gets darker, and you'll have less crossing and further spaced apart lines with the lighter values. You can use that same trick as you did in hatching, where you're counting how many lines you're putting in each box, and you should make sure that you're increasing the amount of lines in each box as you get towards the darker value and decreasing as you get towards the lighter value. I'm going to start out with the number 4 value and try to get a medium gray there at the beginning, and then I'll be creating darker values as I get towards the higher number and lighter as I get closer to 1. notice how the lighter values have more white paper showing through and the darker values have less white paper showing through? That's how you're using the pen and the paper to create a mixed value of gray. It uses optical mixing, which means that your eye mixes the colors together to make the various shade of gray. It's different than if you were mixing black and white paint together to make gray, or if you were using a pencil to do shading where you would press harder to get a darker value and lighter to get a lighter value. The next technique that I'm going to do is stippling, and stippling is where you use the pen to make dots, and the dots are further spread apart for the lighter values and closer together for the darker values. One of the things that's important with stippling is that you don't want to hammer on your paper while you're stippling. That can damage your pen point, and it can also damage those fine nerves in your wrist. You barely need to touch the pen tip to the paper, and if you need to, you can make tiny little dashes also. They don't need to be specifically a point or a dot. It will depend on what kind of pen you're using. If you're using a ballpoint pen, you might need to make tiny little dashes. But I'm going to go ahead and start in the middle with the value number 4 and then work darker and lighter from there. Stippling is the most time-consuming of the pen and ink techniques that I'm going to show you. One of the things that you should go back and check after you've completed a section is you can take a photograph of your pen and ink techniques, or you can kind of squint your eyes a little bit to help with that optical mixing, and just make sure that the number 8 values look darker and that it gradually looks lighter. I know that I've got some area in here that I actually smeared with my hand a little bit, but there are definitely more dots. The dots increase, the lines increase, but you should also be able to see visually a darkening and lightening of the values. The last technique that I'm going to show you is my personal favorite. It is scumbling. A scumbling is a loose, controlled scribbling, and the scribbling is done looser and further apart to get a lighter value, and it is done tighter and closer together with more overlapping to get a darker value. So I'm going to start in the middle again and work to darker and lighter. And there you have it. Hatching, cross-hatching, stippling, and scumbling in 8 different values. Don't forget to like and subscribe this video and watch more to learn more about pen and ink techniques.